No. Okay. Welcome to my channel. This is a special edition on the Vietnam War. It's by request, and I have to tell you, I was quite shocked. I had a viewer that asked me to do a presentation on the Vietnam War, and I said, okay, I'll consider it. And then I decided to ask my viewers if they were interested in that. And 260 people responded to the poll. I was expecting 5 or 6 or maybe 10. I was shocked that I had that many. And so that when I found that out, I realized, okay, I really need to do this. So I need to plan and get started with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some information about the war. Excuse me. You'll have to forgive my coughing. I have a lung problem, and it causes me to cough. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to give you some information about the war. I have an outline that I want to cover, and then I suspect that will take maybe around 30 minutes. And then when that's done, okay. When that's done, I will go into the chat, and if there's any questions in the chat, I will attempt to address them. I can't promise you I can answer them all, but I will try my best. Okay? I want to begin by thanking you for coming to this presentation, and thank you for the strong response to my poll. That was mind-boggling to me. 84% of the 260 people that responded said that they would attend. So that to me is just astounding. That's beyond my imagination. Before we begin, I want to be transparent with you. I am a Vietnam era veteran. The reason, excuse me, the reason I call myself a Vietnam era veteran is because while I served during the war, I did not serve in the war. I did secret shore-based work on the East Coast and in Newfoundland, Canada. I have no direct combat experience from the Vietnam War. However, I have a deep and personal interest in the subject, partly because I served during that period, and especially because my cousin, Donald Leroy Carlson, was killed in action in Thu Thien Province in 1968. So that's the reason why I have spent quite a few years studying the war and learning about the war. My goal for today's presentation is to look at the 3 most common claims about the war with honesty and with evidence. Okay? What those are is that the war was illegal, it was immoral, and it was unwinnable. So that's what I'm going to talk about. First, I want to talk about if the Vietnam War was illegal, as many scholars claim. The common belief, and this is, I would say, probably over 90% of people in the world believe this to be true, that the belief is that the U.S. fought an illegal war because Congress never formally declared war. In August of 1964, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution by an overwhelming vote. The House was 416 to 0. The Senate was 88 to 2. This resolution authorized the president to use all necessary measures to repel aggression in Southeast Asia. Now, I think there's a common misperception, especially in the United States now, that Congress has not declared war since World War II. And in a technical sense, that's true. But when Congress authorizes the president to use all necessary measures, excuse me, that is tantamount to a declaration of war. So in a legal sense, it's the same thing. Okay? Critics argue that the resolution was too broad and was based on false information about the Gulf of Tonkin incidents. That criticism can only be partially true because North Vietnam has already admitted to the first incursion where they attacked the U.S. destroyers. So there were 2 incidents in the Gulf, and those 2 incidences were what triggered the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. But the first incident is confirmed by North Vietnam, so there's no question that it occurred. The second one is still disputed, but on my reading of the evidence, I believe that they at least thought they were under attack, and they did sink some North Vietnamese ships, but North Vietnam has never admitted that. While the war was never formally declared, Congress gave the president broad statutory authority. Legally, the war was on solid ground under the standards and practices of the time, even if it remained highly controversial. The second point, the war was immoral. Most people believe the war was immoral because of civilian deaths, Agent Orange, heavy bombing, and flawed U.S. tactics. There is no question that the tactics that were used in Vietnam were onerous and were, I think, unnecessary, and I'll explain why when I get to the unwinnable part. But they occurred, excuse me, partly because the military was forced into a position where they had to fight a war that was not the war they should have been fighting. And again, I'll explain that when I get to the unwinnable part. The claim is made that Vietnam was fighting for its independence, but this is not really true. Ho Chi Minh was a communist. He was a protege of Dmitry Manuelski. You can look him up on Wikipedia. He was the right-hand man of both Lenin and Stalin. If you're the right-hand man of both Lenin and Stalin, you're what's known as a survivor. You managed to make it past Lenin and connect to Stalin and become his right-hand man, then you are definitely on the inside of the inside. Ho Chi Minh was a protege of Dmitry Manuelski, and he was a dedicated communist. His goal was not to free Vietnam. It was to envelop all of Southeast Asia in a communist realm. That was his goal all along. Yes, he quoted the Declaration of Independence. He did some other things that made it seem like he was fighting for independence, but that was just a ruse. It was his way of winning world opinion to his side when he was not really interested in that at all. Another complaint about the war and being immoral is that the U.S. committed atrocities like My Lai. Now, as a veteran, my opinion is that the men who killed those civilians in My Lai should have been tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. And I think most veterans would agree with me. What they did was completely wrong and inexcusable. However, we never talk about what happened on the North Vietnamese side, what they did. I have done an extensive study of the Hue massacre that occurred in 1968, and I can tell you that the Hue massacre killed at least 10 times as many Vietnamese as the My Lai incident did. It was the My Lai massacre, I should say. It was horrendous. They did things like tying 10 people together, standing them by a trench, and then shooting the person on the end of the line in the head. And when that person fell into the trench, the other 9 fell in with him because they were tied to him. Then they just covered them up and let them suffocate. That's what they did. There was another incident where they killed almost 500 people, excuse me, at a place called Mai Creek by machine gunning them and throwing grenades at them. These were innocent civilians. These were not combatants. Okay? There's another incident in Dak To where they killed, I think it's something like 260 villagers using flamethrowers. They burned them to death. So both sides committed atrocities, but the North had a policy of committing atrocities. If you're interested in that, you can go to Wikipedia and read the article on the Way Massacre. I wrote it. It's very well documented, and the evidence is very clear. The goal of the war was to stop the communist conquest of South Vietnam. South Vietnam was an independent country recognized by many countries in the world, and they had every right to exist. But the communists were bent on taking them over. They wanted to turn all of Vietnam, all of Laos, all of Cambodia, all of Thailand, all of the Philippines, all of Indonesia into communist enclaves. That was their goal. What the war did was it prevented them from achieving their goals because they got stopped short. They ended up turning Laos and Cambodia into communist countries, but the other countries in Southeast Asia managed to remain free. Now, the third point was the Vietnam War unwinnable? The common belief is that it was unwinnable from the start. There was no way that the U.S. could have won that war. And the claim was that the Vietnamese were so, what's the word? They were so determined and so completely sold out to their fight for independence that they would never give in. Okay? Excuse me. The fact is that by 1968 to 1972, the U.S. and South Vietnam were actually winning militarily. There are people that were there at that time that will tell you that they could drive anywhere in the South Vietnam and not be attacked. And so the war was actually won by that time. But then the U.S. abandoned South Vietnam, and that ended up being their downfall. In my personal opinion, and there are many who agree with me, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff, what the United States should have done was blocked the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos. Had they done that, they would have cut off the supply of ammunition and troops to the south, and the South Vietnam would have been able to deal with the what do you want to call them? Communist insurgents in South Vietnam. There were a few. There weren't that many. My personal opinion of the war is that the United States leadership, I'm not talking about military, but the civilian leadership had a very prejudiced opinion of the South Vietnamese and of Vietnamese in general. They thought of them as being stupid. And so they felt like they needed to run the war and take it over from South Vietnam and actually do it for them. And that was not only stupid and immoral, in my opinion, but it was a mistake. What we should have done was we should have taken our troops and put them on the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos and blocked the trail so that North Vietnam could not resupply South Vietnamese communists, and then let South Vietnam deal with the problem in their own country. And had we done that, I believe that South Vietnam would be a free country today, just as South Korea is. Hanoi was supplied by Russia by sea and China by land. So they had plenty of supplies. They didn't have to worry about that. But they had to get them to South Vietnam. In order to do that, they used the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the U.S., excuse me, the U.S. signed a treaty with Laos, a neutrality treaty, and said that they would remove their troops, which they did. But the North Vietnamese never removed their troops. They didn't honor the treaty. They've never honored any treaty. And so what ended up happening was, because they could resupply, they ended up winning the war after the U.S. abandoned South Vietnam and stopped giving them the material and money that they needed to prosecute the war. And so South Vietnam was overrun in 1975. The South Vietnamese who have left and come to the United States and to other countries like Australia call that day Black Friday, because it was a black day for them. They lost their country. The mistakes that the U.S. made was to put political restrictions on the military and provide inconsistent support for South Vietnam. Had they supplied South Vietnam correctly and continually, as they were required to do by the SEATO Treaty, then South Vietnam would be a free country, in my opinion, today. But because they didn't, they're not. Now, just to give you an example of the kind of stupid things that our political administration did, was they tacitly authorized the assassination of Ngo Dinh Diem. They got rid of the leader of South Vietnam because he wouldn't bow to them. He wouldn't kowtow to them. He wanted to run his country his way. And after that, absolute chaos occurred in South Vietnam. It took several years to recover from that. But finally, by 1972, the war was won, essentially. And that's when the United States started pulling out. Between 72 and 75, North Vietnam launched two major invasions. The 1972 Easter Offensive, which was defeated soundly by the South Vietnamese, and the 1975 Spring Offensive, which succeeded only after the U.S. had withdrawn all combat forces and Congress cut off almost all military aid. Excuse me. So, the bottom line is that the war was legal under the law existing at the time. It was a moral war because it was a country defending themselves against an invasion from another country. North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam, and they've now admitted that in their documentation. And it was a winnable war if it had been prosecuted correctly. The chiefs of staff and Westmoreland asked the president numerous times to allow them to block the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They would not allow it. And to give you an idea of how bad it was, LBJ is actually quoted as saying that the U.S. couldn't bomb an outhouse in North Vietnam without his permission. That is no way to run a war. What politicians should do is when they decide it's time to go to war, what they should do is tell the military what the goals are, what they want to achieve, and then let the military carry that out in the best way that they know how, and not interfere and not try to micromanage. And that's what was wrong with the Vietnam War. So, I don't know if that was a half hour, probably wasn't, but I'm going to look at the chat now and see if anybody has any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for, okay, I don't even know how to say this. Ba Koon Maun something. Hello, man. I love your videos. Thank you. Sorry for the bad English. I'm from Finland. What should I do if I have devils around me? Pray and ask God to remove them. Okay. So does anybody have any questions about the Vietnam War? That's what the purpose of this live stream is. If not, I'm going to close it out because I've said what I wanted to say. But I'll be happy to answer your questions. Is this a God Talk stream or a Vietnam? It's a Vietnam War stream. I'm sorry. I forgot to change the title. I apologize for that. I should have edited it, but I didn't think about it until after I started. How long was I deployed? Well, as I said when I first started, I never served in Vietnam. I spent 6 years in the Navy, but it was all on the East Coast. I was stationed in Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, and Newfoundland, Canada. I was doing secret work. The reason why I have an interest in the war is because I was serving during the war, and also because, and more so because, my cousin Donald Leroy Carlson was killed in Vietnam. And so that's the reason why I have an interest in it. I'm really sorry about the confusion. This is not a God Talks show. This is a show on the Vietnam War. I should have changed that. I forgot to. I just didn't even think about it, to be honest with you. Yes, that's true, that the U.S. soldiers that fought in Vietnam were spit on and mocked when they came home. That's been well documented, and there have been people that have argued that it never happened, but the evidence from the time, from news stories and so forth, has shown that it's true. And to give you an idea, I served on the East Coast. I wasn't in the war, but I was so affected by the way that troops were treated that I didn't talk about the war for about 30 years. I just wouldn't bring it up because I was embarrassed. I felt like I had done something wrong, although I wasn't even there. It just was a really difficult time. And you can imagine what it was like for the ones who went over there, were shot at, sometimes wounded, and came home and were treated like that. I mean, that's just, it's shameful. It's unforgivable. It should never have happened. I'm here to answer your questions. Anything that you want to know about the war. If there's something that you believe to be true about the war and you want to ask me about it, feel free to do that. No one has anything, huh? I'll wait. Yeah, I'll tell you a story. Now that I think about it, excuse me, excuse me, where Tough Tough Steez 7117 says it's true that the U.S. Is it true? Is it true that U.S. soldiers that fought in Vietnam were spit on, and mocked when they came home? Yes, but let me tell you a story about that. In the United States, we have an organization called the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. I don't know when it was founded. It might have been World War I. I can't remember. But it's a place where veterans can go and drink and reminisce and that sort of thing, and hang out together with like-minded people. In the Vietnam War, the VFW told Vietnam veterans they were not welcome in the VFW. That's how bad it was. Even veterans turned their backs on veterans. That's, if it was me personally, that would be it for me. I would never talk to a VFW person again. Leaders on the top play games with the people, right? Yes, absolutely. And they, excuse me. So you have to understand the Vietnam War goes all the way back to World War II, really. The North Vietnamese started massacring people in 1945 in what was called the Nam Bo massacre, where they were killing Vietnamese who were, excuse me, they were killing Vietnamese who were true nationalists, who really did want independence for Vietnam. And they were killing them because they didn't want them to gain any popularity. And they not only killed nationalists, they also killed Trotskyites and people that were communists but didn't agree with them. They killed anybody who didn't agree with them. Okay? So they were very single-minded and very focused on their goal, which was to turn all of Southeast Asia into a communist satellite under Russia. Okay, how do you understand the Bible during the Vietnam War? So, how did you justify the war? Okay, to boil it down to simplest terms, in the world there are two forces vying against each other, good and evil, God and the devil. Okay? If you look at the Iran situation or war, whatever you want to call it, that's going on now, the Muslim leadership of Iran wants a world war. They want, excuse me, they want to embroil the entire world in a war because they believe that will hasten the return of their Savior. And so they're willing to do anything, including killing their own people to silence them. That's evil. And so sometimes, or like World War II with Hitler, sometimes you have to fight in order to get rid of evil. It's not because God wants people to die. It's because there's really no other option. If you don't fight them, they're still going to fight you. And if you don't defend yourself, they're going to overwhelm you and kill you. In the 20th century, see, 20th, in the 20th century, communism worldwide killed over 100 million people. 100 million. 75 million people died in World War II. If that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. I mean, that's you know, it's justified in the Bible as self-defense. Just to keep us in unloving fear instead of God's love. Okay. Loving or unloving, my friend, good is in the eye of the one. Well, no, good is in the eye of God, not us. We don't know what good is. We're humans. We're fallen people. We're sinful, and we don't know the difference between good and evil. We have to learn that from God. It's the only way we learn it. Where do you think all our morality came from? Came from God. Let's see, what lasting lessons do you believe the Vietnam War offers to future generations? Oh, God. Okay. See, my views are quite a bit different from what's called the Orthodox view. And that is that some of the lessons that we learned from the Vietnam War are when you go to war, you go to war to win. You don't go to war to just keep the status quo, which is what the whole goal of the United States administration in Vietnam was to just maintain the status quo, not to win. And when you do that, all you're doing is sacrificing young men's lives for nothing. The way that Trump is prosecuting the Iran war is the way that war should be done. If you're going to go to war, if that's the decision you've made, you're going to go to war, then you go to utterly destroy the enemy. You want to leave nothing left. Not talking about people, talking about material, talking about their ability to fight, okay? You want to destroy their ability to fight to the point where they give up. That's the point of going to war. There's anything less than that is you're just saying, I'm going to sacrifice the bodies of my own people for nothing. And so one of the lessons that we should learn from the Vietnam War was don't fight half-assed wars. Don't go to war with a goal to just keep the status quo. If you're going to go to war, and you should never go to war unless you absolutely have to, but if you're going to go to war to fight it and to win it, period. And if the United States had done that, if they had gone into Vietnam in 1963 and established bases in Laos, blocking the Ho Chi Minh Trail, that war would have been over in 2 or 3 years. Because they couldn't have fought it. They would have been stopped. So that's one of the lessons that I would say we should have learned. It's not the lesson that a lot of people get is we should never fight wars. But that's, in the world that we live in, that's impossible. Look what Hamas did to Israel. What's Israel supposed to do? Just sit back and take it? I mean, if they did that to any other country would not sit back and take it. Excuse me. Okay, I love this. I totally respect you and understand what you're saying. I'm from an old communist country, and I love Jesus. I love communism, and I don't think that it's from the Bible to fight between two beliefs. Well, okay. We might as well get into this. Jesus Christ said, you can't worship two gods. You will either love one and hate the other, or you will serve one and despise the other. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Okay? If you serve God, you cannot serve the state. The purpose of the state is to, in the United States at least, it's supposed to be to protect our rights, defend our God-given rights. In communism, the purpose of communism is to take care of the people, to feed them, to house them, to clothe them, to give them work, to do everything for them. In other words, communism replaces God with the state. That's ungodly, plain and simple. And the communists across the world in the 20th century killed over 100 million people in order to get their views to become dominant in those cultures. Well, how do you justify killing 100 million people? It's certainly not godly. I mean, I don't think this is even arguable. You know, I can try to list them. I think the Soviet Union killed over 20 million people. Chinese communists killed over 60 million people. Cambodia's communists killed 21% of their population, 2.5 million people. They actually grabbed children by the legs and slung them up against trees so they wouldn't have to waste, quote, waste ammunition. That's the definition of evil. Okay? So, I don't know. Frankly, I don't know how you could believe the Bible and believe God and love Jesus and still love communism. That makes no sense to me, because you're trying to serve two masters. Jesus said, take the hit and be loving. What? No. I think you're probably thinking of the thing where he says turn the other cheek. But you also have to remember that when he sent his disciples out to teach to people, what did he tell them to take along? A sword. Because you have the right as a Christian to defend yourself. So, no, you don't just take the hit. And, the Quakers are a good example of that. They refuse to fight. So what happens to them? They get overrun. It's not, it's not God's will that you just sit back and take evil and let it do whatever it wants to you and you not fight back. Do you know anybody affected by Agent Orange? What effects did it have long term? Okay. I don't personally know anyone that was affected by Agent Orange. I know that there are people that were. I have a friend. Excuse me. I have a friend who actually knew guys that were on the planes that dropped the Agent Orange, and he told me that when they first were assigned to these crews, that they would drink Agent Orange to prove that it was not harmful. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, and I know that a lot of things have been attributed to Agent Orange that are not necessarily caused by Agent Orange, but there are things that they've shown a correlation from. And another thing you need to understand about Agent Orange was that the South Vietnamese asked us for it. We didn't just arbitrarily go in and dump it. They asked us to do it. And what it was used for was to clear out the jungle beside roads so that it would be more difficult for the North Vietnamese to ambush them. Okay, Jesus turned the other cheek. Message had contextual significance in the Roman Empire at the time. Okay, Romans would slap only with the backhand of the right arm. Using the left would show weakness to people below them. To turn the other cheek would force them to use the backhand of their left. Oh. Yeah. Again, I don't know if the drinking Agent Orange story is true or not. I mean, I don't have any reason to think he's lying to me, but I do know there's guys who served on those planes and basically got drenched with that stuff because the North Vietnamese would be shooting at the planes and they sometimes hit the canisters and the stuff would spray all over and they were not affected by it. But that's not to say that no one has been. Let's see, or use the palm of the right rendering. Notorious 69, thank you for sharing that. I was not aware of that. Okay. That's an interesting insight into the scriptures. Very interesting. Believing to the devil. I don't know what that means. Believing to the devil. Let me see what you said earlier. Okay, I don't know what that means, believing to the devil. You'll have to expand on that if you don't mind. It's, one of the things about the Vietnam War is that it affected America tremendously. It completely changed the politics. It completely changed the attitude. Recent polls have shown that there's a lot of people, a significant number of people in America that actually hate America, that think America is a terrible country. And that's really sad to me. I mean, first of all, why do you stay here if you really believe that? What are you trying to accomplish by staying in a place you hate? Why don't you move to somewhere where you think you'll be loved? But that was one of the outcomes of that conflict, was that it turned America into a lot of self-hate and a lot of discontent and willingness to use violence to get your... Okay. I sent a message before that. Don't you see it? Let me see. The problem with the chat is they don't let me... they don't let me search the chat. Oh. Sorry for the bad English. I'm from Finland. What should I do if I have devils around? Believing to the devil. I can't. I need to. You must have another one there. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, I'm very close to the mic, so I'm sure I'm loud now. How did you understand the Bible during the Vietnam War? Okay. Okay, I'm not sure I understand. Afghan war still happened. New generations do fools again. Yeah. Sorry, Vietnam lesson not worked. Yeah. Okay, I want you to understand. I love my country. I do not love the leadership of my country. The leadership of my country has been, in many cases, very evil and very destructive. And I wish I could change that, but I can't. It's there's been a lot of things done in America that were wrong, that were not necessarily illegal. Technically, they were legal, but they shouldn't have been done. And it's just, I mean, we have been involved in so many wars all over the world. And now I see I've frozen. Okay. We've been involved in so many wars all over the world that we never should have been involved in, that, we had no business being involved in. And then there are some that we should have been involved in and were. But most of it, I think, my personal opinion now, has been done to enrich the leadership. And that's probably true of every country. That, the leadership of the nation is a lot more concerned about lining their own pockets than they are about doing what's right for their people. And, that's the sad truth of the matter. This Dane also love America, not Trump, thank you. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Well, thank you for loving America. I think, I guess I would say for me, what I love about America is the ideals that it was founded on, not the leadership that has run it. And many times, excuse me, many times I have not voted for those people, and I have been dismayed when other people did. And now we have a bunch of people in America who think that we should become communist, which is beyond insane. It's absolutely beyond insane. In the 1960s, during the Vietnam War, there was a group called the Weather Underground. They wanted to turn America into a communist country, and they actually said, they were recorded on tape by the FBI saying that they thought they would have to kill 20% of the American population in order for communism to take over. Well, at that time, that would have been about 50 million people. Just like, it's no big deal. We're just going to have to kill them because they'll never submit. I can't. I have trouble wrapping my mind around the idea that there are people who actually think that way. But there are. And it's insane. It is definitely not godly. It's not godly to kill people to get your way, to get your political way or your any kind of way. To me, there's no difference between a man breaking into someone's house and killing them to take their stuff, and communists breaking into a country and killing people to take it over. It's the same thing. It's murder. It's evil. It's wrong. Okay. So, Mercapusu, okay, I see. Do you believe that the America that you are talking about is approved by Jesus? No. See, God is in command. He's in charge of the world, and if Americans don't turn back to God, then the country will fall, just like every other country that turned away from God fell. Look at the Israelites. They did it over and over and over again until finally God got so tired of them that he just said, I wash my hands of you, be gone. And they got scattered all over the world. But God, because he made a covenant with them, said, there's going to come a day when I'll bring you back together, which he has now done. But that doesn't mean that he loves every single person in there. I mean, that's not a good way to say it. God loves everyone, but he doesn't approve of a lot of people and their behavior. If one has to use force to make change happen, they are wrong. Yes, but if one uses force against you, you have the right to defend yourself. And you have the right to ask others to help you defend yourself. See, that's the thing that some people get the Bible twisted, where they think that we should never do anything to people that are evil. But that's not God's will, that we should just lay back and be slaughtered because we shouldn't be fighting. Okay? I believe Jesus is an angel. And no, Jesus is not an angel. Jesus is the Son of God. I talk about this in my book. I don't know the mechanism that God used, but I do know that Hebrews says that he was a man just like us, which means that he had to have 46 chromosomes. He got 23 of them from Mary. Where'd the other 23 come from? God. How God did that, I don't know. I mean, it's one possibility is he just created a sperm inside of Mary that impregnated the egg. Okay? But he is the only begotten Son of God. He's not just an angel. Actually, the Bible says he's above the angels. Jesus affirmed that he is God as the Son. I and the Father are one. Okay. I don't want to get into that discussion today, but I struggle with the concept of Jesus being God because there are so many verses that say that he's inferior to God. For example, he says, of that day no man knows, not even the Son, but the Father. Or, I always do my Father's will. In Revelation it says he'll be, how's it put it? Not it's Revelations, it's, gosh. I think it's Corinthians now, I can't remember for sure. But it says that when all things are completed, Jesus will turn over everything to God. Well, if he's turning everything over to God, then God is different from him. I believe that Jesus Christ is divine because he has God's nature in him. He was created by God inside of Mary. And so he is divine, and he had a divine nature when he was living on earth. That's not to say that he is God Almighty. Okay, I think there's a distinction there in the Bible. So I'm not a Christian. I still love you. Well, thank you for that. I love you too. Again, if you're interested in seeing the full exposition of that, just send me an email and say I'd like a copy of your book, and I'll send it to you. It's a PDF. I don't want to injure anyone's faith, and so I don't want to argue about it. But in Ireland, we have a big Christian group called what? Laestadianim. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Laestadianims. I've never heard that before, so I don't know. I mean, it's possible. Here, let me go. Can I? Yeah, let me see if I can Google that. Where am I? Actually, I don't use Google anymore. I use Grok. Okay, so I've just asked Grok, what can you tell me about the Laestadiums? I'm probably pronouncing that horribly. I hope you'll forgive me for that. And are there any in the U.S.? And we'll see what he says. I got to get another cough drop. Okay. Are we going to get an answer? Okay. Yes, there are Laestadians in the U.S. They're most concentrated in areas with large Finnish and Scandinavian immigrant populations. The largest group is the Apostolic Lutheran Church of America. Most congregations are in the Midwest, especially Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, excuse me, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and some in the Pacific Northwest and a few other states. Many Laestadian churches in the U.S. still conduct services partly or entirely in Finnish, though English is increasingly common. That's interesting. You're saying they're in Ireland. Oh, no, in Finland. I'm sorry. I misread that. Yeah. So, is it the last days? I would say that the indications are that it is. I don't know when that is. Jesus Christ said of that hour, no man knows except for God. So, it wouldn't do you any good to ask Jesus because he doesn't know. But, yes, I believe we're in the last days. I just don't know how long that takes. I have some thoughts about it, but I can't, prove anything from Scripture. No one can because, like Jesus said, no one knows. Because of you, I no longer go to church. Your word opened my eyes to the wickedness that went on around me while I was in a brainwashed and oblivious state. Okay, well, I hope you don't mean you've abandoned God. See, wanted to hear more about you. Perceive faith during the. I still pray. Okay. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Sorry for joining the chat late, but I wanted to hear more about how you perceived faith during the Vietnam War. I missed the earlier discussion. Well, you have to understand, I was raised a Lutheran, went to church regularly every Sunday, sang in the choir, was an acolyte, the whole 9 yards. And when I went to college, I went to Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, and my plan was to be a minister. But I might as well tell you the whole story. Luther College had, at that time, something that they called the interim period. It was a 6-week period where you could do something that was entirely outside your major. And the idea was to expose you to new things. Some people, for example, people who are in accounting, would go to Minneapolis and go to work as what they call them. They're unpaid workers. I can't remember the word now. Anyway, they'd go to work for Arthur Anderson, an accounting firm in Minneapolis. And so some people would use that time to further their education in their field of interest. Other people would do things entirely. For example, they'd take an art class or they'd take a music class or something, and maybe their major is pre-med. I decided that I wanted to stay home during the holidays. And so what I did was, I was majoring in psychology. So what I did was I designed a program to help underprivileged youth in downtown Washington, D.C., because I lived in Bethesda, Maryland. And so I put together a program of sports for kids that lived in D.C. Many of them were black. And so I went to a meeting in the basement of a home of one of the parents to tell them what I was trying to do, which was to put together a basketball program. And I told them basically what my plan was, and they passed a hat and they got some money for me. I don't remember how much money they got me, but this I will never forget. I went to my pastor and I said, hey, I'd like to speak at church about this program and have the people here give me money, because I thought I could get a lot more from my church than these people in downtown D.C. who were struggling to get by and managed to give me money. I got less. And then I had friends who would come up to me and they would say things like, you're not really going down there, are you? Don't you know it's not safe? And I was like, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I never felt any fear about being surrounded by black people, by being in black homes, by talking to black parents, by working with black children. It just never occurred to me that that should be a dangerous situation. And the more that I heard that, the more I thought, what the heck is going on? And then I began to realize these people are prejudiced. And I was so put off by that I actually dropped my plans to become a preacher. I thought, if this is what Christians are like, I want no part of it. Okay? So when I was in the Navy, I was just kind of, my Christian life, I guess you could say, was on idle. I wasn't doing much. I wasn't reading the Bible. I wasn't praying. I wasn't going to church. I still considered myself a Christian, but I just didn't think about it much. It wasn't until my second, or I think it was my second year in the Navy, that I met a group of Christians who were very zealous for the Lord, and got involved with them. And that's when I started changing. I started reading the Bible, started studying it, started learning about it. And I found out that as a Christian, you're not supposed to rely on the church to teach you about God. You're supposed to study the Bible yourself and learn it for yourself. And you're supposed to rule your own life, not allow others to rule you. And so that really changed my outlook on Christian living and on how to be a Christian and what I should do as a Christian. And I learned to speak in tongues. I became Spirit-filled. I started talking to God. God started talking to me, giving me guidance in my life. And as the years have passed, that's just become a much deeper and more solid foundation for me. I mean, I'm to the point now where you can say anything you want to me about how God doesn't exist. It's just like water off a duck's back. I know he does. There is no question in my mind. Now, if you want to sit and discuss it open-mindedly, then I can give you all sorts of reasons to show that God does exist. But if you don't want to believe he exists, that's fine with me. I don't care, because I'm going to heaven. I don't know where you're going. And it's not my job to convince you, it's God's. If God wants you, if he's called you, he will get you. Plain and simple. So, during the war, my faith was greatly strengthened and made much more solid. And then I've shared the stories about Lead, about how, the things that I did there, and how there were things that happened during that period of time in my life that convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that God not only exists, but that he cares about me, and he'll take care of me personally. And so, I'm not perfect. I struggle a lot with things, certain things. Some things I don't struggle with. Excuse me. My wife says I'm dumb because this is a while ago, we had a neighbor that she was absolutely certain was hot for me. I didn't see it at all. I just, that stuff doesn't even interest me. I have no, it's not something that tempts me. There are things that tempt me. I struggle a lot with health, with believing that God will heal me. Even though I have evidence in my own life that he does, I still struggle with that. It just, every one of us has our own challenges in our walk with God. And it just, that's the nature of man, I guess. I'm so glad God is here. Makes life worth living, finding her love. Okay. We've gotten off the topic some, which is okay, I guess. And I messed it up by not changing the description of the video before I started. I should have done that. I just didn't think of it. That was amazing. Thank you for telling us that. Oh, thank you. I could. I'll tell you one story. I've told this before. Some of you may have already heard it, but I'll tell it to you because it's such a, for me, it's such a positive proof of God. We were involved in a Christian ministry, and we went to a program. And part of the program, this was a year-long process, and part of the program was a trip to a place called LEAD, which stands for Leadership, Adventure, Leadership, Adventure, Leadership, Education, Adventure, and Direction, LEAD, okay? And the deal with the trip was you had to hitchhike down from Indiana to New Mexico, Tinney, New Mexico, which is a stop on the side of the road. You had to spend 10 days in the wilderness, and then you had to hitchhike back. And you had 96 hours to get there, 96 hours to return, and you were given $15 each. So my wife and I, between us, had $30. And you had to return the $30 when you got back. So just like the story in the Bible, you could take that $30 and stick it under your shoe and just keep it and not touch it and return it when you got back. But, how is that believing in God? My wife and I talked about it, and we said, you know what? If God isn't big enough to replace any money we spend, we want no part of him. And so we spent money on the trip down. We spent money when we got there. We actually bought a knee-high grape soda and a honey bun. There's a Tinney, New Mexico is a single building with, it's a post office and it's a general store. And so we went in there and bought a grape soda and a honey bun. And another couple came up to us and said, would you please give us some money so we can get that? And we said, you got your own money. Use your money. And they walked away. We bought T-shirts at the place, the mountain climbing place. Then we hitchhiked home, and on the way home, we got a ride with a trucker. We bought him lunch. He paid me for loading his truck because he didn't have any pallets, and so the people at the dock wouldn't load it for him. So he asked me if I'd be willing to load it, and I said sure. So I loaded his truck for him, 80,000 pounds of butterball turkeys. And this whole time, we're not looking at our money. We're not thinking about it, like how much do we have? Do we have enough? And when we got back to the place, we were the last ones to arrive. We were like 3 hours before the deadline. I went to the receptionist and I said, is everyone back? And she said, well, they're all back, but there's one couple that was short on their money. And I said, okay, well, we're going to go up to our room and get cleaned up. Call me and let me know when they come if they still need money. And so about a half hour before the deadline, she calls me and she says, they're back. And I said, well, did they get all their money? And she said, no. I said, well, how much money are they short? She says, $7.10. I reached in my pocket, pulled out the money that we had. Guess how much it was? $7.10. We had already turned in our 30. That was the extra. So you see, God blessed us and then blessed us above and beyond so that we could bless someone else. That one incident convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that God not only exists, but that he cares and that he will do everything in his power to meet every need that you have. And I still marvel at that to this day, because it's so incredible. I mean, exactly to the penny what they needed. That's just one example. I could give you plenty more. But, none of us is perfect. None of us is without sin. None of us can go to heaven without our Savior. Excuse me. Every single one of us has to depend on God to make it to heaven. And if you don't believe that, it makes me sad because I know what the outcome will be, but I can't control what you believe any more than you can control what I believe. And, here I am at the age of 78, got a few more years to live. If I live the way I want to, I've got 42 more years, or 41 and a half, because I plan on living to be 120, because that's what God said our lifespan was, and I want it all. But if I die tomorrow, for me it's not frightening, not concerning. The only concern I would have is what happens to my wife, because she needs to be taken care of. She's at a point physically where she can't get alone on her own completely. And so, I just keep praying that God keeps me healthy so that I can bless her, and so that I can continue to tell people about Him. So, to the one who said, you don't go to church, you still pray regularly. Yes, and read the Bible too. Read the Bible, because God will open your eyes if you do that. I don't understand that. What God eat and drink? I'm not sure what you mean by that. God is spirit, so He doesn't need to eat or drink. We've been going for about an hour and 18 minutes. So if no one has any more questions, how were positions picked for the U.S. military? As in, how did people become helicopter gunners, and how did others not see combat at all? I'm not educated on this, so forgive me if it sounds dumb. No, it's not dumb at all. This is something I've said many times in my life because people don't believe it. I spent 6 years in the U.S. Navy and never set foot on a ship. Excuse me. 6 years of shore-based duty in the Navy. That gives you a perfect illustration of what the military is like. You see, the military is like, it's like you have, I think, I may be wrong about this, but I think it's true. About 20% of the military are combat troops. Okay? 20%. The rest of them are support. You got to have cooks. You got to have mechanics. You got to have bakers. You got to have priests. You got to have, they call them cryptographers. You got to have intelligence people. You got to have planners. You got to have organizers. You got to have secretaries. When I was in boot camp, I was the secretary. They call that yeoman in the Navy. So, to answer your question, the military does aptitude tests to see what people's inclinations are and what their skills are, And then when someone shows an aptitude for a certain skill, they will train them in that skill. That's how I got trained to be an electronics technician. So it's partly based on your background, your experience. It's partly based on testing that they do to try and determine where you fit the best. But you know, a guy who's going to be a helicopter gunner, it may just be, it could be just a roll of the dice. I mean, he just ended up getting assigned that, okay? Not that he's necessarily any better gunner than anybody else, but he showed an interest in it, and so they said, okay, we're going to make you a helicopter gunner. Some guys are what we call the grunts. They're the ones who are on the ground, you know, absorbing the bullets and fighting the battles. Some guys are called to do different things, you know. If you just think about a Navy ship, on a Navy ship, you got to have cooks, you got to have mechanics, you got to have people who, for example, on an aircraft carrier, people who are flight, you know, air control or flight control. You got to have people who are. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. And thank you also, Johnny Smiles. You know, you got to have people that put the fuel in the planes, the aviation fuel guys. You got to have firemen to put out fires. That's their job. You got to have gunners who handle the guns on the ship. You got to have pilots who fly the planes. You know, it's almost like a small city, especially an aircraft carrier, where they have 4,000 or 5,000 crew. It's everything that you know that you would think of in a small town that you would need. Place to eat, place to sleep, you know, all the different jobs that are involved in that. You know, you got to have they call them yeomen, but they're secretaries who take care of all the correspondence. You got to have radio men who handle the radios to talk to the pilots and to talk to other ships and to receive messages from home. Excuse me. It's the military is a it's almost like a cocoon. It's like an entity unto itself, if you will. They have to be self-sufficient when they're at sea. So every possible need you could have has to be taken care of by somebody. You know, they got engine men who work in the engine compartments and take care of all that stuff. Guys who fix the propellers and the shafts and those kinds of things. Excuse me. You know, it takes for every guy that's on the ground with a gun shooting, there has to be like 6 guys behind him supporting him, taking care of the things that he needs, bringing him supplies, bringing him food, bringing him letters from home. It's a huge organization, and there are guys who they just, for them it's normal to be in the military. They wouldn't want it any other way. For me, it was abnormal. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something I wanted to do for my life. And so when I had served my 6 years, I got out. Yeah, I used to think it was all combat. Well, see, because that's where the attention is. You know, the attention is on where the conflict is. But there's, yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I think it's like 20% of the people that are in the military are on the front lines fighting, and the rest of them are support. You have generals whose entire job is to figure out the logistics of how to get things to the right places at the right time to make sure the troops are supplied. That's all they do, logistics. You have other ones who are, financial. They make sure the guys get their paychecks on time. It's like a small city. It really is. Every military base is like a small city, self-contained city. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you. Axel Sundqvist, thank you. Did the support still do rigorous physical training? Oh, yeah. Yeah, everybody had to be in shape, yes. Didn't matter what your job was. You had to be in shape. And you had to learn to use weapons because you never know. You never know when you might be in the fight. And so everyone was trained. I'm gonna tell you about my boot camp. I went to boot camp in San Diego, and they had 4 weeks of basic training, and then 5 weeks of advanced training. During the advanced training, you did things like you learned how to jump into the water in a way that would keep your head from going underwater. Because if you're on a ship and it gets sunk, you got to be able to get in the water from, way up high. On an aircraft carrier, it's like several stories high. So you got to know how to do that. Okay? So advanced training was a lot of different things. But I was asked when I was in basic training, they asked for any volunteers who could sing, and I raised my hand. And so they said, you're in the Blue Jackets choir. The Blue Jackets choir sang at the graduation ceremonies at boot camp every week. Okay? And so because they did that, they had to be training for that. So they got out of all the other training. Except for 2 things. You had to do the water survival training, and you had to do rifle training. Those 2 things were required, but everything else you could skip. Okay? So then when I got to the Blue Jackets choir, they asked if anyone knew how to type, and I raised my hand. I'm such a fool. So they said, okay, you're the yeoman for the choir. So because I was the yeoman, guess what I did during boot camp? I sat in the office with the chief petty officer all day, every day, except for when I went to water survival training and rifle training, which I enjoyed those anyway, so I didn't mind going. But the rest of the time I sat in the office with him. And because the Blue Jackets choir took so much training to prepare for the graduation ceremonies, they extended our tour in boot camp for 4 extra weeks. So instead of being in boot camp for 9 weeks, we were in boot camp for 13 weeks. Well, the last 4 weeks, they got liberty on the weekends. They could go out off the base and do whatever they wanted. And I was the one who made the liberty list, because that was one of my duties as the yeoman. And so the last 4 weeks that I was in boot camp, I gave myself liberty on Saturday and Sunday, both days. And my wife at the time was there and living in San Diego, and so I would go and spend the weekend with her. But so I went through boot camp and didn't really do much training at all, except for water survival and rifle training. It's kind of funny. The military is it's so different from civilian life. It's just a completely different atmosphere, a different vibe. When I was getting ready to get out of the military, all of my buddies were saying, "Man, you don't want to leave. You can have babies for $6 in the Navy." And I'm going, that is not a good reason to stay. I'm not worried about paying for the baby. I don't want to stay in the military. Yeah, one of the things about my military training that still sticks with me to this day is I can sleep anywhere. I don't have to be comfortable, and I can put up with almost anything, because you have to put up with so much in the military that's uncomfortable, that's not pleasant, that is rigorous, that is demanding, that you just get used to it and it becomes a part of your life. And so for me, I just don't struggle with those things at all. They got trained out of me, I guess you could say. Yeah, how to keep going while suffering. Yeah, that is definitely, like living out in the boonies for weeks on end, never taking a bath, being covered in mud and stuff like that, and not complaining about it because it's just part of the job. Those are the kinds of things that you learn in the military that civilians would probably be unhappy about doing. But, if you're in the military, you have no choice. You either do it or you get kicked out. So, any other questions? Does the Navy have drill instructors? Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're just like, well, I don't know if they're as rigorous as the Marines, but they're pretty tough. Yeah, they had something in boot camp when I was there called the 5040 Brigade. This was now you're going to be shocked. This was for the bedwetters, because there are guys who go in the military and they still wet the bed. Okay? Have you considered that the devil is speaking to you through your youth and the Vietnam War? No. The 5040 Brigade was for bedwetters, and this is what they would do. They would make them make their beds with what they called hospital corners, which is there cannot be a single wrinkle in the sheets or the blanket. Okay? They get them up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They had to make their beds with hospital corners, and then they would march them across the base, and they would dig holes and fill buckets. And then they would carry those buckets across the base to the other side of the base, and they would empty them and dig a hole to put the dirt in. And then they would fill them with the dirt from the hole, and they marched back to the other side. They did that all day, every day, until they stopped wetting the bed. And if they couldn't stop, they sent them home. Now that seems really cruel if you think about it, but they had to be. If you think about it, on a Navy ship, they call the beds berths. The berths are stacked like they're like maybe that high, if you can see that, maybe 18 inches, okay, between berths. You got to kind of slide in there sideways to get into it. Imagine if the guy above you is wetting his bed. You can't have that. And so they either trained it out of them or they got discharged. One or the other. Yeah. Scream in your face? Yeah, for sure. And, call you all sorts of names. Demand all sorts of things from you. I mean, they were tough. I assume it's still that way. I don't know because, I haven't been around the military in a long, long time. But that's the way it was when I was there. I mean, it's pretty much a way of training. Discipline can be wetting the bed at that age. Yeah. Yeah, the purpose of the military training is not to. I was never in Vietnam. I said that right at the beginning. I served on the East Coast, secret work. Excuse me. The purpose of boot camp is to get you to the point where you will obey orders, not unthinkingly, but instantly and completely, because your life depends on it. And you just have to learn to yes sir, no sir. You gotta do it when you're told. And after you respond, if you think about it and you say, wait a minute, that's an illegal order, then you say, no, sir, I'm not going to do that. When I was in boot camp, the drill instructors were very strict, but they would not call anybody names. Well, you must be younger than me, because when we were in boot camp, yeah, they called us names. Do you have any suggestions on how to find what you want to do as a professional in life when you feel like you can't find anything that fits you with purpose? Well, one thing I would suggest to you is look at my video. Let me see if I can find that for you. Okay, I have a video called How to Find a Job You Will Love. Okay? So, my suggestion to you would be look at that video. Excuse me, because that will give you some ideas on how to focus yourself on what would be the most meaningful way for you to work. Okay? And then, of course, pray about it and ask God to tell you. Yes, the secret work that I did is declassified. It was called Project SOSUS, SOSUS. Basically, what the Navy did was they laid hydrophone arrays on the floor of the ocean. A hydrophone is a device that listens for sound. And these arrays were like long, long cables. And then when you got to the array, there'd be a hydrophone spaced every so many feet. There'd be 40 of them to an array. And they picked up sound from the ocean. And then that was fed back to the base where we were stationed. And it's kind of interesting. It was converted into electricity, which caused a stylus to arc, and then there was a roll of paper that was fed through this machine, and the stylus would go across the page and arc whenever there was a frequency detected. And so basically what you'd end up with is a white sheet of paper with a bunch of lines on it. Okay? And those lines represented the noises that it picked up in the ocean. And those noises would be propeller noise, generator noise, shaft noise, and other noises like that. And from that, I was stationed in Newfoundland, Canada, and we could see Russian submarines coming out of Guantanamo Bay. We could detect them, in other words. We could tell where they were. We could identify them by hull number because the combination of sounds, the sound of the props, the sound of the shafts, the sound of the generator, was unique for every ship. So we could actually identify them by hull number. And that was declassified sometime in the 90s, if I remember correctly. So it was an array to detect, well, not U-boats, because that was World War II, but Russian submarines mostly. I mean, we detected everything, obviously. You know, hydrophones are not discriminatory. They pick up every single sound in the ocean. So we'd pick up whale sounds, we'd pick up small fishing vessels, big merchant ships, all that. But we could identify every single one of them, so we knew what they were. Yeah, it was. They were called, the title for that job was Ocean Systems Technician. And actually, if you just Google SOSUS, SOSUS, you'll find it on the web. What do you think about the current geopolitical situation with Russia and the future of Europe's security? Wow. What makes you think I would know anything about that? I think Russia, excuse me, I think Russia is often made out to be the bad guy when they're not as bad as they're made out to be. I think they are bad. They've done some bad things like attacking Ukraine. But I don't know. I don't know if Europe is a threat. I mean, I don't know if Russia is a threat to Europe or not. I just don't know enough about it to know. I mean, I know that in the end times, all the nations of the world are going to come against Israel. And that's when all the nations of the world will get wiped out, because God will not allow his people to be destroyed. But whether that involves Russia or Europe or Asia or whatever, I don't know. You know, I'm kind of a simple guy. I focus on the fact that God loves me, and I don't worry too much about all the other stuff. Should the U.S. leave NATO? I think we should, because it's lost its utility. And, excuse me, what happened after World War II was Europe was kind of destroyed. And so it had to be rebuilt. And so the U.S. helped to rebuild a lot of it. And we put bases over there to protect people and that kind of stuff. And I think we let it go on too long. We basically infantilized Europe as if they weren't able to take care of themselves. And I think Europe is perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. They don't really need us.
Time's up.
I'll be out in a few minutes. Are they here? My wife is saying time's up. um, uh, I mean, if we needed to come to the aid of Europe, I'm sure we would, but I don't know if NATO is. I don't know if it has any utility anymore. You know, I don't know if it's really useful. What's your favorite dinner dish? Oh, my wife's enchilada casserole. Mmm, that is delicious. I guess I better go. I got uh, grandkids coming over um, to celebrate Mother's Day. So I just want you to know that I really appreciate you all coming. It's amazing to me that people want to hear what I have to say. I still am just gobsmacked by that. Um, I did notice something today. My subscription count went down quite a bit over the last couple days. I don't know what's going on with that, but uh, if war has been declined illegal, then how can there be a word for refusing to serve in the military establishment? Uh, Thank you. Oh my God, 3 a.m. Bless your heart. I don't know how you do that. But anyway, I got to go, so I'm going to have to close this out. I thank you for coming. Um, if you want to do another one of these, just let me know. Maybe I'll do another one in a few weeks. But for now, I'd like to pray for you, that God will watch over you, that He will take care of your needs, that He will bless you in every way possible, fill your life with joy and with peace, and that He will do that for every single person that you love as well. So, until tomorrow, this is the Vietnam Era Vet.